Driving called it.
So somebody called because he was in the driving.
He passed out.
Passed out in the driving.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
And
right.
then you had more.
Yeah, I had to move out of the way, and then when he pulled up, he actually just hit over the curb onto the grass and, like, backed it off.
Okay.
So I, you know,
Sure. Okay. All right, we go talk. What's the name? Yeah, everybody did. Yeah. Hey, Mr. Brooks. Hey, Mr. Brooks.
How you doing?
Hey, Officer Roll, the Atlanta Police Department. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
All right, so tell me, I wasn't here, so can you tell me what?
All right, after the conversation and the field sobriety test, which we didn't include in this clip because it takes about 20 minutes to do, Rolf reached the conclusion that he was driving under, that he believed he was driving under the influence of alcohol, and he began the process of placing him under arrest, which can be seen in this video. I want to note here particularly that the police didn't come into this encounter hot. There was no hostility. There were businesslike. They were polite. Brooks didn't seem to be like a danger. He didn't seem angry. It's one of those cases where it's just sort of a regular police-citizen contact that doesn't seem to be of note at all. So at this point, this is actually
On this Brooks?
when Rolf decides to administer the breath test.
I don't want to refute anything.
It's yes or no. It's completely up to you.
Yes, I will.
Okay, just wait here while I grab it. Take a deep breath in, mouth over mouthpiece, blow as hard as you can, so I'll tell you stop. Blow, 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 stop. Very good.
I just had a few drinks, that's it.
How many?
1.5, like I said, I was into the second cup. I wasn't even, I told her, man, let's go, because I'm hungry.
What kind of drinks did you have?
I'm not sure, it's on the sheet order. She said top shelf or whatever.
Top shelf what?
I'm not sure. It was, like I said, it was her birthday, and it was my daughter's birthday intent to, you know, have a good time. And I said, hey, you know, I'm hungry, let's go. My baby's mom, she was there. I said, hey, go ahead. Cool. You know, here's the money for the blow up bed tomorrow. Here's the money for, you know, to enjoy herself tomorrow. You want to get a burger or something? Just let me know. I'm ready to go.
So you had about 1.5 drinks. You don't remember what kind of drinks they were?
No, sir.
All right.
I really don't remember.
All right. I think you've had too much to drink to be driving. So put your hands behind your back for me. Put your hands behind your back.
At this point, the body camera for Rolf is knocked off, and it lands on the pavement, lens up. So basically, the rest of the recording on Rolf's body camera only has audio, and the same thing happens to Brosnan's body cam. It gets knocked off. Luckily, it faces up, so we were able to capture the audio. So the legal principle that we're dealing with here is that when an officer with probable cause seeks to arrest an individual, that person is not free to flee or resist the arrest. Although he retains the right not to speak with the officer, it is unlawful for a suspect to flee a pursuing police officer in an attempt to escape arrest. So the two charges that the officers have probable cause to arrest at this point are DUI and escape, and they could charge misdemeanor escape, they could charge resisting arrest. At this point, those are the two basic charges, but it's important to note they have probable cause to arrest him once they make the move. Here is where we're going to go into the resistance, assault, and flight. In a previous statement, it was stated that Atlanta police policy requires that you notify an individual that they are under arrest prior to placing them under arrest. That's not correct. The Atlanta police policy does not require that. And as a result, we found that Officer Rolfe's attempt to arrest him was clearly within the law. This is a customer in the drive-through who filmed on a telephone, on a cell phone, the fighting or the fight. And you can see that from this distance, from about this point on, I don't think there's any other way to describe it, but Brooks proceeds to beat the crap out of the two officers. But again, as I said, video never lies, but until you break these circumstances down, it's really hard to tell what's going on in that video. And that's how long it takes for this to explode into violence, that Brooks fights his way out and runs down to where the red car is, and that's where Rolfe fires the fatal shots. So what we did is we broke down the videos, or had the videos analyzed and broken down into still photographs. This is a frame-by-frame analysis. What they did was they stabilized each of the videos and synchronized them. Then they added in the video to the timeline, and we were able to determine by a hundredths of a second at each step of the video, depending on the frame rate of the video. So the first photograph that we show this is the first time Rolfe makes physical contact with him. You can see he doesn't jerk him around, he doesn't try and slam him to the ground, he more or less is touching his hand to maintain contact of it and starts to put the handcuffs on him. Mr. Brooks at that point lunges forward with his left hand, and you can see in the circled area that he is actually escaping the handcuff. The handcuff's not closed, and he manages to pull his hands out of it. Brosnan's hands are on the right side of the picture, and he is trying to hold Brooks's right arm. Officer Brosnan at that point, when they go to the ground, he tries to do what's called a drive stun with his taser. A drive stun is where you use the probes on the taser, you pull the trigger, and it's what's called a pain compliance device. In other words, it inflicts pain so that the person will stop doing what they're doing, and in this case, that's fighting the officers. Rolfe is the one with his back turned to the camera, and Brosnan is the one on his knees there holding it. The next slide shows that Brooks sits up, despite having Rolfe on his back, and grabs the taser before the drive stun can be completed. And he grabs Brosnan's taser, and they struggle over the possession of the taser. At this point, Brooks lifts Rolfe off his back, lifts him off his back and throws him out into the parking lot, and gets him off of him, which allows him then to start to rise to his feet. Rolfe is thrown to the ground, and he is in control of Brosnan just outside of, or on the other side of them. He has got Brosnan down on his back, basically, and is holding him with his left hand. They are still fighting over the taser. Brosnan tries to maintain control of the taser. It's still in the left hand of Mr. Brooks. I can't leave the podium, but you can see it in the yellow is the taser, and it's in Brooks's left hand. Brooks picks up Officer Rolfe a second time and throws him off and throws him forward onto the ground. So Rolfe, he concentrates on Brosnan, and he gets Brosnan's taser away from him while he leans over him and holds him to the ground. This is a wider shot of that. Rolfe is still trying to control Mr. Brooks's head and shoulders, but he has the taser. He then strikes Officer Rolfe with his right arm and hits him in the neck and hits him beside the ear. At that point, he still has the taser in his left hand. and he begins to transfer it to his right hand in this frame. Here you can see that the taser has been transferred to his right hand, and at that point he starts to use it. It's pointed at Officer Rolfe. He, at the same time, he's pushing Brosnan back off his feet onto the ground. He then tries to, Rolfe at that point uses his own taser. He tries to deploy the taser against Brooks. Mr. Brooks using the taser. He fires the taser, which you can see the flash on the taser on the left. In that case, he is firing the taser at Officer Rolfe, or at least the probes show it's headed in their direction. And you can see that we can tell the taser is being discharged because of three things. There's a puff of smoke, there's a spark, but there's also a flashlight on it that comes on every time you pull the trigger. We also know that it was deployed at this point because the taser has an internal device that tells us the exact time that every time it's activated. So we can correlate the time on the timestamp of the video to the time on the taser, and we know this was Brosnan's taser, but he was firing it at Rolfe. The video tells us that. He turns and then starts to try and do a drive stun on Officer Brosnan. At this point, he's not successful. Brosnan manages to raise his left arm and ward off the taser, but he has Brosnan, who's on his knees, and he's trying to do a drive stun on him. A second pop goes off, and that is Mr. Brooks using Brosnan's taser to fire the probes at Officer Brosnan. Brosnan has his arm up, as you can see. Wait a minute, I'm one ahead, but you can see at this point a second pop's heard, and Rolfe tries to deploy his taser against Brooks. Those probes miss and don't strike. In the meantime, Brooks is turned down over Brosnan and is still trying to hit him with the taser. At that point, Brooks fires at Officer Brosnan. Brosnan was struck in the hand by the probes from the taser. He had some effect from the taser. He's also by this time had a concussion because his head was bounced off the pavement. Rolfe is still trying to get a shot on the right-hand side of the picture with his taser, which he then deploys as the second deployment. We know in this case that one of the taser, they hit Mr. Brooks. One of them was lodged on the back on his right side where you see that little puff in his shirt. The other lodged in the shirt, so therefore it didn't connect, didn't have an electronic connection. So when Rolfe pressed the trigger, he didn't get the effect. The taser did not immobilize Mr. Brooks. But Brooks at that point turns and starts to run around the cars. Brooks is hooked to him by the taser probe that's in his back, and he is running, chasing/following Brooks, attached to him by the taser lead. At this point, the officers have developed additional probable cause to arrest Mr. Brooks. The charges that we believe that would be appropriate, had this stopped at this point, had everything stopped, they could have arrested Mr. Brooks for felony obstruction of a law enforcement officer, which is, of course, when you obstruct or resist an officer with violence. Removal of a weapon from a public official, which is the taking of the taser. Aggravated assault on a police officer, which is the use of the taser, both against Rolfe for firing it and on Brosnan for actually hitting him and shocking him. And then possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, which would be the possession of the taser. So in addition to the initial probable cause, the officers now have additional probable cause to arrest Mr. Brooks. This is the force. We've looked at all of the uses of force, including this combat that we've shown you, but the primary place of our investigation is the use of deadly force. And what we've done here is there's a Wendy's video camera that captures the chase from one end of the Wendy's parking lot all the way to the end where the actual shooting takes place. To give you an idea of the time frame, it takes 17 seconds to play this video, which means it took 17 seconds for that chase to occur and for the things that we saw in the video. When you watch it the first time, which I'm going to let you do now, well, when we watch it the first time, it's very hard to pick out details until you break it down frame by frame, and we've done that. We've broken it down into 3 chases. So the first one, this is the Wendy's video. The only thing that's been done to it has been stabilized. It has not been sped up or slowed down, although the GBI report did contain a slow motion version of it. But the experts gave us this. They called it cleaning up, but it's only been stabilized and brightened a little bit. There's no changes to it. The next video is the first. I asked that they break this chase, our technical folks break this chase down into 3 parts, because I think those are the most critical portions of it. You can see how fast it went and how fast decisions had to be made and choices had to be made. This is the first third of the chase. You can see them come out from behind. You can see them come out from behind Brooks's car. That's him fleeing from the fight. And he starts to run. In this picture, if you look closely, and you might not be able to in this medium, but if you look closely, the taser wire is visible in the space between them. So Rolf is still trying to taser Brooks, and you can tell they're very close because they're only the width of one parking space apart as they run. If you look closely, you can see that Brooks has the taser in his right hand. Okay?
And I'll point out too that during this time, multiple witnesses confirmed that they saw Rolf trying to tase Brooks, but with no effect. And the reason there was no effect is simply because both probes did not land.
All right.